Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Tarantino, the host of the YouTube channel called Exploring Everything Spiritual, and the author of the #1 bestseller called Dying to See: Revelations About God, Jesus, Our Pathways, and the Nature of the Soul. And I'm extra proud to announce that I recently was notified that my book, Dying to See, was the Golden Award winner of this year's Global Book Awards in the category of Faith and Spirituality. So grab your copy and let me know what you think about it too. And welcome to my program, beautiful souls. It is my hope that these stories will connect to you in some way, or at least touch your inner knowing of your spirit, so you may understand there's more miracles around us than we know. Please click the like button below and feel free to share any of my video, and don't forget to subscribe below to see future amazing videos about everything spiritual. My guest today is John Davis. Let me tell you a little bit about him. John had a life-changing near-death experience when he was 21 years old. As a result, John has never been afraid of dying. In fact, he says he looks forward to it so that he can be with his loved ones again who have crossed over before him. Welcome, John, to my program. I'm delighted to have you here today.
Hi, Janet. It is so nice to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited about this subject. So
I
now,
so enjoy sharing my story. So thank you for the opportunity.
you bet, because you had a fantastic encounter with heaven where you actually were given a tour, correct? And can you please tell us what you learned and tell you about your tour, what you saw?
Sure. I'll tell you what happened in the beginning, how this all started is I was having surgery, or I was going into the hospital to have surgery on my hand. I'd had a moped or a scooter accident, and I ran into a tree and I tore the tendons off my hand. So, and this was the first surgery that I ever had. I'd never had any surgery before this. So I was in the room, and they went to give me the anesthesia, and I had an allergic reaction to it, and it stopped my heart. And I was actually dead for 7 minutes. What happened during that 7-minute period is probably the most extraordinary thing that's ever happened to me. And that became my near-death experience. I was 21, and I had no idea that there was life after what we call death. I was raised a Catholic. We used to go to church 3 days during the week and then on Sunday. So I grew up very Catholic, and I was always skeptical. And I'm still skeptical of things until I can see them and understand them for myself. So this experience that I had was really took me for a loop, and it's since then changed my life for the better. And I hope that my experience will change the lives of your viewers for the better as well. That's my hope. So anyway, I'm in the hospital and it stops my heart. As soon as I was physically dead, it seemed like milliseconds. I opened my eyes and I was standing in the most beautiful building that I have ever seen. It was made of marble. It looked beautiful, white, pristine marble. And it had the columns, the beautiful white columns you see from the Greco-Roman time period of architecture, all the way down. I was so taken aback. My first thought was, this hospital is so much bigger than I thought it was. It was this huge corridor, and it went down. I would have to say it was miles long because I could not see the end of it. So try to imagine this. This is probably one of my most favorite parts of my experience and what this looked like. If you can imagine this long corridor made of white marble columns, probably 20 or 30 feet high on the right, going all the way down. To the left of those columns were tables. Again, beautiful marble tables, square with seats on all four sides. And corresponding to the column were these tables. They went all the way down as far as you could see. And off to the left, right in front of these tables, were these doors. or tunnels. I've never really been able to describe them to make them sound what they really looked like, but they looked like they had been cut out of the solid marble. Perfect rectangular doors, about 8 feet high and about 6 feet apart. And they went down all the way down the corridor, just like these columns did. And it was right about, well, I should back up and I forgot to say something there. My guide, we all have spirit guides. Of course, I didn't know anything about this, but when I first got into this building, someone to my left, he said, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." Well, Alan, this guide, showed me everything that I'm going to share with you. And he told me everything I was seeing, and he was speaking to me in my left ear. So that's how I know what these buildings were. So that's just a little bit of background. And he told me to go look inside this tunnel. And it was like a door, and it was solid black. So I walked over to the first one that was next to me, and I looked in, and I could see it was like looking at space. There were stars and planets and galaxies. It was absolutely magical. And of course, I didn't know what these were. I had no idea what these tunnels were. And on each table in front of these tunnels, there were 2 people. And he told me that these people are counselors. And what they are is they're orientation counselors. The building that I was in was the orientation building. And somehow, you've heard the stories of a typical near-death experience where the person gets out of their body, they see themselves looking down, they see the staff, or they see the accident scene, then they're aware of a tunnel, and then there's someone that comes to get them, usually because the other side always sends someone to get us. And then you see the light. Well, I bypassed that somehow, and I still don't know how this happened to this day. I was transported into the orientation center on the other side of that light. So when people go in the tunnel and they see the white light and they cross into it, they're in the orientation center at that point. So he told me to look at the next tunnel. So I looked at the next tunnel, and a man came through that tunnel. He was old, he was an elderly gentleman, probably 80s or 90s, and he had his right hand holding his chest. And my guide said he died from a heart attack. So I was watching this, and I started to realize, okay, when people die from Earth, they come from these tunnels. Somehow these tunnels connect both worlds together, the Earth plane and the other side. So he came through, and one of the women stood up, and she walked over. One of the counselors stood up, walked over to him. She took his hands in hers, and she led him back to the table, and they sat down. Well, I was too far away to hear what she was saying, but I could see her mouth moving, and she was talking to this man. And I found out later on that what orientation counselors do is just what the name sounds like. They orientate that soul back to the other side. They say things like, you just came from a lifetime on Earth, you passed it, you successfully completed your lifetime, now you're back home again. And a lot of people apparently need that, because in life, we have something called, and I don't know how it happens, but we have amnesia. Somehow when we come into life, we also go through a tunnel. Another one, there's ones for outbound, coming out of your lifetime back to the other side. And there are tunnels that you go into to take you into a lifetime here on Earth. So the tunnel, I watched him come through. She stood up, she brought him to the table. She was talking to him about what was happening, or what had just happened for him. And my guide said, watch him carefully. So I was watching him, and all of a sudden, Janet, right in front of my eyes, this man changed from someone who was in his 80s or 90s to a young man in his early 30s. And the reason for that, and again, I don't know why, but over on the other side, we're all in our 30s. We're young, we're healthy, have very strong bodies, no sickness, no disease, no cancer, and no one dies. It's an absolute paradise. So she was telling him all of this, that he came back from his lifetime, he's finished, he completed a great job. And for some reason, it's a really big deal when you come to Earth, because they told me that Earth is the hardest of all the planets. So when you finish your lifetime here, it's a big deal because you've gone through so much. Life here is hard, and there are times when you might seem like you can't make it, but it's all worth it in the end because it's such a big accomplishment. Well, after he turned back to his normal appearance on the other side of a man in his 30s, he stood up and he walked off to the right between the columns. And there was these 3 stairs, 3 marble steps he walked down, and he was in what they call the gardens. And apparently this happens for everybody. Everyone has an orientation when they get back, where they see their loved ones who crossed before them, their loved ones, friends, family members, acquaintances, everyone that they knew in their lifetime, plus everyone who they already knew on the other side, meets that soul when they cross over. And it's a joyous, wondrous event to watch. All these people were clapping, congratulating him, hugging him, and basically saying, you did a great job, you finished your lifetime. And that was the very first place I went to. And I just think of it now as the orientation building. And the buildings were so extraordinary that after my NDE, I tried to find examples of what these buildings looked like. And there's a building in Turkey, and it's called the Temple of Artemis. The Temple of Artemis looks almost identical to what I saw this orientation building look like. Just a beautiful marble column building, just like what you see in ancient Greece. So that was the first part. Then my guide, again, he took me to these different buildings, and what he did is he showed me the outside first, and then he took me to the inside, but he wanted me to see what they looked like. And I think for the reason for me to be able to share this. And somebody I talked to sent me an email, and they said it sounded like where he took you was like in a university setting. Because in a university, you have all these buildings in one campus. And I thought to myself, you know what? That actually sounds exactly what happened to me. Not that it was a college campus, it wasn't that, but all these buildings were in this one central area of the other side. So my guide essentially gave me a tour of this specific area. And I don't know how large it was, but it was enormous. But the other side is like a planet. It's huge. So I only saw one small part of it. So after he took me to the orientation building, he took me to a building that was rectangle with, again, the columns on it. And you walked in, and it was like being inside of a movie theater here on Earth. But it had this, instead of having one screen in the front of the building, on the top, it had screens, movie screens all around, and it was like a circular. So you walked in this building and it was round on the inside, like you were inside of a theater. And all of a sudden, on these screens, parts of my life started showing up. And I found out that this is what is part of what's called the life review. And everybody, when they cross over, they go through a life review. And on these screens, it was like watching a movie of myself, of when I was a little kid, One screen was when I was in elementary school. Another screen was when I was junior high. Another one was in high school and college, and all these things that I had done. It didn't show anything past the age of 21 though, because it wasn't supposed to show me anything past that point. It just showed me my life. And I realized that somehow, and this has to be a God thing, because I cannot comprehend how this works, but our lifetimes are actually recorded. Somehow God has the ability to have your lifetime play when you do your life review. And it's so detailed that you can see conversations you had with people. You see your whole lifetime. And part of it is the reason you have your life review is to see if you accomplish the goals you set for yourself. And it's no way any kind of a judgment. There's no judgment against anyone. Your guide is the one that sits with you and watches your life review. And he or she simply says, yes, you accomplished what you set out to do. Look what you did here. This was a wonderful thing. Over here, you did something wonderful. You had a great conversation with this person, and on and on. And that's part of the life review. So that was the building he showed me second. The third one, it looked again just like the one from the past life or from the life review. But the next building was where you go if you want to see past lifetimes. Again, it was a round theater when you walked in, but instead of having all the screens around the top, it had one screen in the front of the building, just like we have when we see a movie theater. And on the screen, they started showing me past lifetimes. And if you've ever had a past life regression, you know just by looking at that's you. That's your soul in a different body having an experience. And the first lifetime they showed me, and again, at this time, I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't know any of this. And I certainly didn't believe in past lifetimes because I was raised Catholic. That all that came later. So the screen started playing a lifetime of a Buddhist monk. And I had a red gown on, like a red robe. I was bald. And my job was to teach kids in this monastery. So that's the first lifetime they showed me. I was like, wow, that's really remarkable. The next one they showed me was a lifetime as a fisherman. And I was standing in a boat, and I had a net, and I was throwing the net out to catch fish. Part of my job in that lifetime was to get food for the community or the village. And the third lifetime they showed me was of a shoe peddler. And I remember it was a cobblestone road, and I had a wheelbarrow, and it was a long time ago, somewhere like in Eastern Europe is what I got the feeling of. And I collected people's shoes from the community and I repaired them. And then I took their shoes back to them, like delivering their shoes at their door. So that's kind of what I did in that life. And the reason that my guide showed me that is he wanted me to know that past lifetimes were really real, because the soul, our essence, never dies. We're eternal. We go on for eternity. And it's a hard concept to try to understand that, because when your body dies, you think that's the end, but it's not. When the body dies, that's just how you get back home again, because Earth isn't our home. We just come here for school, to learn, to develop, and to grow spiritually. And the reason is we don't have those same experiences that we can have on the other side, because the other side is perfect. There's no war, there's no disease, there's no hunger, there's no poverty. None of that exists over there. It's an absolute paradise. So we come here to Earth to learn lessons and to experience and to grow our soul. And that's what he was trying to show me with that, showing the past lifetimes. And not only that, not only can you look at your past lifetimes, but you can see other people's lifetimes too. Like if you wanted to see the lifetime of Shakespeare, you could go look at his life. Or if you wanted to see the life of Alexander the Great, you can go look at his life in these rooms. And they're just amazing. So that was the past life part. The next place he took me to, the outside of it again had beautiful marble columns, but this building was round and it had a dome on the top, and it was absolutely enormous. I can't even describe how big this building was, but it had the dome and the columns in a circle. And for whatever reason, we go to this building when we want to plan a different lifetime. And we go there and we have scrolls, like those papyrus scrolls that fold up, and that's what they looked like. And we all have these scrolls. And on the scrolls, we write down what our main goals are for this lifetime. And it's very detailed. It covers things like your parents, what country are you gonna be in, what language are you going to learn, what friends are you gonna have, what school are you gonna go to, what career, everything. And even goes up to how you pass, how you cross from that lifetime to go back home. So all of this is in one of your scrolls. So he showed me in this building, there were tables everywhere again. Again, so much of this is all marble, beautiful white marble. And there were 2 scrolls on the table, and they were my scrolls, the scrolls of my life. I don't know why there were 2. So I took the one scroll had a blue ribbon around it, and the other one had a red ribbon around it. And I picked up the one with the blue ribbon, and I untied it, and I put it on the table, and I folded it out so I could look at it. And it had the writing like if it was calligraphy. Like if you had calligraphy handwriting, it was all black lettering, and when I tried to read it, it folded back up again. So I wasn't allowed to read what my life was going to be about. I was only allowed to see that this is how we plan a lifetime. We come to this building, we plan our lifetime with our main spirit guide. He or she helps us plan what it is we want to accomplish by coming into life. So that's kind of what they do, and how they help us with designing your lifetime. What do you want to learn? What do you want to develop? What skills do you want to have? And not only that, but you plan challenges in your life also, tribulations, things that you want to test yourself, and that's how you plan your lifetime. So on these scrolls. Oh, something else I want to say. I had forgotten about this episode, this part of this, until I went back and read my original notes. Have you ever heard the concept of soulmate?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have.
Okay. Soulmates are actually real. And I didn't know this, but everybody has a soulmate, and that's like your twin soul. It's your perfect mate. But your perfect mate doesn't always come into a lifetime with you. You have that perfect mate when you're back home on the other side. But my guide showed me that you can look at your soulmate's book, the book of life, about who they are, their lifetimes, what they've learned. And he took me to the area where the books are, and it was a huge library. It was like looking at the library of Encyclopedia Britannicas. They were all kind of purplish maroon color, and they had gold writing. But instead of having the writing go across the ledger at the back of the book, the writing went down. And my book said N-I-N-A, Nina. Nina is my soulmate on the other side. And I thought, this is just amazing. We can all look at the book and you see your soulmate. So I didn't want to forget to mention the soulmate part, because that was something that I think gives people a lot of courage, that if they don't find the love of their lifetime here on earth, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because the love of your life is on the other side. And when you get there, you'll be back together with them, and everything, you'll have that feeling of absolute being loved and know what it's like to love. It's your perfect mate. So that was that building. The next one he took me to was also a favorite of mine. The outside looked like a stadium, like the Broncos stadium, for example, but it was bigger, just a huge stadium. So we go inside, and there are thousands and thousands of seats in this building. Nobody was in there. It was just me and my guide. And there was somebody, a gentleman, who was behind me. I didn't look back to see where he was, but there was someone behind me who ran this part of this experience. Where I was in a planetarium. And you know, when you in a planetarium, you go and you can look up at the ceiling and they'll show stars and they'll show different planets and things. Well, that's what this was. And the man behind me said, "Let's get started." And I sat down and all the lights went off and it was pitch black. So I was looking up at the ceiling, and he said to me, "When you look at the stars," meaning people on Earth, "when we look at the stars, this is what we see." And he started showing me our constellation, the Milky Way. Then he showed me Jupiter and Neptune and Saturn, all the planets in our solar system. And he was telling me that what you see is very small. Because then he said, when we look at the stars, meaning everybody on the other side, when they come here to see the stars, this is what they see. And all of a sudden, he started showing me planet after planet after planet. First, there were dozens, then hundreds, then thousands, then millions of planets. Some were red, some were blue with oceans, some were brown, some were yellow. And he told me there was more life in the universe than you can possibly know. And here's something my guide told me. Earth is not the only place that you can have a lifetime. All of these other planets have lifetimes. You can have a lifetime there too. I could not see what the people looked like or what the civilizations looked like because I was seeing these planets as if I was in orbit. So a lot of people have asked me, well, did you see what they looked like? Did you see what the villages or the cities and I couldn't see any of that because I was just too high up. But Earth is not the only place we can come to. Earth, though, is the hardest of all the planets. That's because there's so much negativity here. And the reason that we come here is to learn from that negativity. Because on the other side, there are no wars. All the other planets have evolved past that. There's no sickness. I mean, well, there's sickness, but there's no, the other side doesn't have death. There's no sickness on the other side. So on these other planets, you can go and have lifetimes there too. And they told me that not very many souls want to come to Earth because it's so hard. So the ones who come here are strong to go through everything that they go through. So I thought that part was just absolutely fascinating too. Sorry, I keep looking at my list.
That should tell everybody how strong they are and that this life is an honor.
Absolutely. It's like a badge of courage. It's a badge of honor when somebody makes it through this lifetime. One thing I want to say too, that reminds me, a lot of people that listen to my story ask me about suicides and what happens to them. Well, what happens to suicides is they're taken to healing centers on the other side, and they're loved and given compassion and given counseling. You'd be surprised how many people have written to me asking me what happened to their son. Was their son tossed into hell because he committed suicide? And I tell them, absolutely not. God doesn't send anybody to hell because of a suicide. That person is hurting. and they go to their side and they're given counseling and help and love until they're back to normal. So I just wanted to mention that real quickly. This next building he took me to, again, was marble, and it looks like the building of the Supreme Court, with all the stairs leading up to the top. You have to walk up all these stairs to get to the top, and on the top are the columns. And then the building goes back again as far as you can see. I couldn't even see an end to this place. Again, I didn't know what it was until we went inside. And when he got me inside, it was a library with, I can't even tell you how many books, millions of books, with really tall bookcases and shelves lined as far as you could see. And there was so much activity. I could see people studying, people were talking with each other, people were looking for books, and it was full of activity. And my guide took me to a place off to the left. And this was another one of my favorite parts of this, is, you know how in our libraries here on Earth, we have study rooms off to the side?
Mm-hmm.
This is what these rooms looked like, study rooms. And he took me over to one room and he said, I want you to look inside. I looked in and there was a woman sitting there. Her back was to me, and she was sitting on a couch, and she had a purple gown on, purple kind of reddish. She had dark jet black hair down to her waist. And she was looking at what we would call, it looked like a flat screen TV. And back then, this was in 1987, we didn't have flat back television sets yet. So this technology was really new to me. But if you saw it now, you would think, okay, that's a flat back TV. And it was mounted on this wall. And he said, I want you to watch, my guide said, I want you to watch what's playing. Well, what was playing was a time in Earth's history, what they call, or what we call, the Plains Wars. The plains being the grass plains, the grasslands of Native Americans and the US cavalry. And this girl was watching a battle that had actually happened 200 years ago. And I thought to myself, how is it possible that she is watching a video of something that happened decades and decades ago when there was no video equipment? And my guide said, everything is recorded. And this part absolutely fascinated me, because anything you want to see, whether it's a historical event, like I would like to go back and see what it was like in June of 1945 when the Allies invaded France, Normandy. They took the beaches. I would love to see what that was like. Anything you want to see in history, you can go to these rooms and you can actually watch and see what happened. But there's something else. And this was something that I cannot wait to get back to see. Do you remember the show Star Trek Next Generation?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever remember seeing that? Do you remember what they called the holodeck?
I remember the picture, but didn't they call it the holodeck?
Yeah, well, no,
Yeah.
The other side doesn't call it that. That's just what Star Trek called it. But
Okay.
there's a place, and it's inside of these rooms. I don't know how it works, but if you want to experience what it was in the past, like let's say you wanted to go and see what it was like on the Titanic before it sank, you can go into that lifetime and you can actually be a visitor there as it was actually happening, but you can't touch anything, you can't change. It's almost like being a ghost. They can't see you, but you can go and experience what it was like for them during that time in history. So what I started to learn about my experience was that so much of the other side is about learning and about growing and about establishing and evolving, and you learn by seeing things, and there's such an emphasis over there to learn, because that's what people, the place that they took me to, that my guide took me to, was one about learning. That's why the whole idea of the university campus made a lot of sense, that all these buildings are in roughly the same kind of area. So that was really neat to see that part, that you can go and look in history and see what it was like. So that was that building. The next one he took me to was a castle. And I don't know if you heard me talk about this one before, but this is also an amazing part too. But there's such an emphasis on learning that the buildings that existed on Earth are also replicated on the other side. So if you wanted to go look at the history of medieval Europe, there's a place on the other side you can go to where you can actually see the castles that were built. Exact replicas, but perfect, absolutely beautiful. And my guide said, walk inside. So I walked inside this castle, and it was just huge. And it had red carpet on the floor, just like castles have nowadays, this beautiful red posh carpet. On the left-hand side of this castle were life-size pictures of kings and queens, of people that lived in that castle during that time period. And what this is for is, if you want to learn about that type of history, you go to this place and you walk into the castles, and in front of each picture, there's a podium. And on the podium are books. They look like Bibles folded out, just kind of flipped over. And what it is, it's a description of that person's lifetime, who they were, what they did, what their accomplishments were, did they take care of their people, when all these different things are in there. And again, with these books, you can see conversations. So if you wanted to read about the life of King Henry VIII, you would go to the castle that he lived in. You could get his book, and you could flip through it, and you could see his lifetime. It was absolutely extraordinary. And here was something else that happened. And to this day, I still kick myself because I didn't do this. As I was standing there looking, I looked off to the right, and there was a circular staircase that they had in castles. That's how you got up to the second and third floors and everything. Well, there was a girl coming down from this stairway. She had strawberry blonde hair, and she was wearing kind of a pink outfit, like a tunic or a robe. She walked right up to me. She could see me, and she said, "Can I help you find anything?" And I was so shocked. You know what I said to her? I said, "Oh, no thanks, I'm just looking around." And I could have asked her anything. I could have said, "Where am I? What's going on? What is this place? What happened to me?" But I didn't. And I found out that you work on the other side, but you don't work to earn a living like we have to do here to pay bills. You work on the other side in things that you love to do. This girl, what she loved more than anything was the history of medieval Europe on Earth during that time period. So if I wanted to come in there and learn about Queen Elizabeth, for example, she knew all about the different royal families that lived in that house. She was like a scholar. So again, if you wanted to learn something, you could go talk to her. And I didn't know that until afterwards, or I would have asked her, "What is going on? Where am I?" But anything you want to do, like people love to hike, they ride bikes. If you want to be a writer, you write. If you want to paint, or if you want to swim, go to the oceans, and anything that you love to do here, you can do over there. But it's actually even better. And here's something that I was so excited to find out. But did you know that our animals also have souls? and they cross over also, because I saw two of my cats. I couldn't believe it. They were young and they were happy. Both of those cats, we had to put them down because they had cancer.
Mhm.
And it was so, I can't even, it was such a joyous thing to see them. I didn't have time to play with them, but I saw them. And my guide wanted me to know that our animals do survive also.
Right.
So when our lives are finished, we can go back and be with not only our loved ones again, but also with our loved animals. And that was something that I took away with it just brought tears to my eyes, thinking, oh my gosh, it's really real. It's true. And here's the last thing that happened. My guide took me to a field, a meadow, and he disappeared. He left me at that point. And right in front of me, another gentleman showed up, and it was Jesus. And I thought, wow, this is extraordinary. And all I could see from him were his hands and his feet. He was wearing sandals that laced up his calves. They were gold in color. He had a white robe on, and he had a golden sash. He was different than everybody else I saw. Everybody else looks just like you and I. But Jesus was so bright in his head that I couldn't see his face. It was like there was some kind of light just coming out of him, like rays of the sun coming off his face, and I couldn't see that part of him. But he spoke to me, and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." And instantaneously, when he said that, I was back in my body inside the surgery room. And I looked up at the surgeon and I said, "What just happened?" Meaning, do you know what just happened? And he said, "We lost you." And he said, "You were gone for 7 minutes." And they had to use the paddles to bring me back. And that was my near-death experience. And it took me the better part of 2 days with my mom's help to help me realize where I was and what had happened. And because I had no idea. My mom had read a book written by Raymond Moody in 1975. It's called Life After Life. And because nobody at that time was ever talking about near-death experiences. You didn't even hear about that back in 1987 when I had my experience. And people have asked me, did you come back with any particular gifts or abilities?
Mhm.
And I always say, no, I didn't come back with anything other than the fact that I have 100% recall of everything that happened. All the buildings, the conversations, the people I saw, all of that is still as clear in my mind as it was as if I had it yesterday. And that has to be a God thing. God must have let me remember that. Because my job, Jesus didn't ask me to do this. It was like he was telling me, I want you to tell people there is no death. So all these years, I've been telling people, trying to share my story, that there is so much more, that there is so much to hope for, because your loved ones, your family, everyone's on the other side when they cross. There's any kind of experience that you go through here on earth, if it's grief or sorrow or pain, or there's a reason for all of it. And when you get back to the other side, all of that is gone. And you're just back with love and joy and friendship and family. And it's such a paradise there. It's so different from here. And so I want to let your listeners know that no matter what happens to them, no matter what suffering they go through here on earth, it's all for a reason, and it's only temporary. This lifetime literally is like a drop in the ocean compared to eternity, and that we're just here to learn as much as we can. And really, there's two two things we're supposed to do when we come here. We're supposed to develop our souls, learn, grow, and experience, and also to help alleviate the suffering of humanity. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what we're called to do when we come to life. So that was my experience. And it's so clear in my mind. I think about it and I can see it just as if it happened yesterday.
Yeah, these things just don't go away. They just don't go away. Yeah, I really resonate with a lot of what you said, but the meeting your relatives and stuff when you go home. Although I didn't see relatives in my near-death experience, but I was with my mom when she was passing, and she could see up into heaven, and she could see the animals that were in the field. Yeah, she could see the animals in the field and the buildings. So she could see the buildings.
Oh, that's wonderful.
The streets were spotless, and she would say, "There's a gathering happening." And as she got closer to her final breath, the gathering grew. So this is the gathering of your relatives that you're going to be with when you go back to heaven, in the garden, obviously. So
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. She saw that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah. So she had a lot to look forward to. So yeah.
And
so
this is something that they told me, and again, I don't know how this works, but if we talk out loud, they can hear us.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to talk to your mom, like if you're driving and talking to your mom, she can hear you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they can hear us in our minds, like when we pray, but they can hear us when we talk out loud. So every time I'm driving, I'm always talking to my friends who've crossed, family members, and my father-in-law. I talk to him a lot too. He crossed. And something else I'll mention just for the fun of it. I've never had any other spiritual experience happen from my near-death experience until my father-in-law passed away. He came to me in a dream the night that he died, and he said, "Please tell my family I'm okay." And I woke up my wife and I said, "Sherry, I just saw your dad. He came to me in a dream and said he's okay." It was the only thing that's ever happened to me since my near-death experience. And it was just such a nice thing to have that validated that it is real.
Yes,
everyone is, they go back home again, and that's the real home.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of stories like that, like what you just said too. Because I saw my brother after he passed. About a week after he passed, he came to me in the white room, and and
that's wonderful.
So he just by the intention of hugging each other, we hugged each other. And when I went to the funeral home to say my goodbyes to him, I didn't know how to touch a dead body because I'd never been near one like that before. And so I caressed his face, the side of his face, in a figure 8, and pepper kisses all over his face. And when he hugged me, he rubbed my back in a figure 8. So he knew. I said, "You were there." See, he was there in the.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. He wanted me to know that I was there, and he was saying his.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so they're still around. I talk to them just in my mind, and they answer. You just have to.
So they can hear us.
Yes, they can hear us. They can hear us, and so many people often think that that's their imagination when they hear the answer back. I mean, it's not going to be a long conversation. I'm here today. They'll answer the question briefly, and you have to realize that really is them. So.
Oh, that's, all these years I never knew they could hear us in our minds. That's great to know.
Yeah.
That's
and
wonderful.
prayers are in your mind, and then your prayers are answered too. So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for having me on.
You bet. Your journey to heaven was amazing, and sheds more light, on what we can expect in the afterlife. And it sounds absolutely fabulous.
So much to look forward to. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. Hey, John, can you tell the audience how to reach out to you if they would like to get hold of you?
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody anytime. They can reach me on Facebook under John J. Davis in Colorado, or they can email me. And my email is johnjdavis65@icloud.com.
Great. I will put that information under the video in the description area for those that would like easy access to it. So you can check there. Yes. So now I would like to turn back to the audience and say, as we head out for the day, I ask that you wake up each day with a sense of wonder on where you will be guided, what you will be shown, and who will be placed in your pathway for you to learn from, because life is the most magnificent mystical adventure you'll ever have. So let's make the most of our life journey and always remember the message that I was given to bring back, and that is that love is the only thing that matters. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Janet.